The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for September 13th through the 17th of 2021. Alright, we'll start off with the pound dollar. This is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So this horizontal trend line right here, that's attached to this pivot right here, just recently became legitimate with its three touches at this point, and the third point right here. And since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term, I am long biased. Right back up to this horizontal trend line right here. However, on the weekly chart, since there's more short strength than long strength, in the short term, I am short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So there was a strong short trade that formed right here, and then a week long trade formed right here. And so the weekly bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high right here. And so as price pulled back, I was looking for short entries on the lower time frames, right back down to this pivot low as a target. And that target was hit right here. And moreover, as price pulled back to these levels right here, I was still looking for short entries. However, if you recall at this point right here, there was compact long price action that formed that shows strong long strength. So at this point, the bias changed to long, or in other words, price was now likely to reach this pivot high up here before reaching this candle's low right here. And so price came up and hit that main target at this level right here. And then the following week, there was another strong short trade that formed right here. And then a week long trade formed right here. And so again, the weekly bias became short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. So as price pulled back, I was looking for short entries on the lower time frames, and that main target was hit right here. And then furthermore, another week long trade formed right here. So again, the bias was still short, but now price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. And so as price pulled back in these areas, I was looking for short entries. And then this week, a daily short trade formed, which is along with this weekly short bias. So I took a short entry at this 1.3835 level right here, with a stop loss at this pivot high right here, with its main target for the time being at this 1.37 level right here through this 1.3660 level right here. Alright, so let me further explain this short trade I took at this level right here. So let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, I took that short entry a couple days ago at this 1.3835 levels right here, with the stop loss at this pivot high right here, and its main target be at this 1.37 to 1.3660 levels right here. Now in this trade's case, I'll be taking the entire position out at this 1.37 to 1.3660 levels, and will not be leaving a portion in to see if it can hit that weekly bias's main target at this level right here. Now the reason why I'm not extending any portions to the weekly bias's main target at this pivot right here is because there's a strong monthly trend line that runs right through this 1.37 levels right here, and moreover a strong monthly horizontal trend line that runs right through this 1.3660 levels right here. Now due to this trade being on the daily chart, these monthly strong levels can possibly be a main target for this daily short trade. And so for the time being, price does reach these levels right here, I'll be watching the short-term price action for any signs of short-term long strength. However, if there happens to be no short-term long strength on the lower time frames, I will let that target extend right down to this 1.3660 levels, right at these levels right here, where I will take the entire position out, regardless if there's any strong short-term long strength on the lower time frames. Now let me go and explain to you why this 1.3660 level is the maximum price level I will take this trade to. So let's go over to the weekly chart. Okay, so on this weekly chart, like I explained in previous forecasts, price is stuck inside this small gap right here. However, right below that, there's another weekly gap that is slightly bigger than the previous. Now, in my opinion, this upper gap right here is not big enough and thus strong enough to be a main target for that daily short trade. However, the gap below at this level, again, in my opinion, is big enough and strong enough to be a main target for that daily short trade. And this lower gap starts at that 1.3660 level. So even if price does get through those monthly trend line levels I was talking about earlier, in my opinion, I highly doubt price could get through this weekly medium gap at this level right here. Alright, so let me just sum up these targets again on the monthly chart for you. Okay, so again on this monthly chart, that diagonal trend line I was talking about is from this pivot to this pivot right here. And that horizontal trend line is right here, which is attached to this pivot right here. Okay, so if price starts to reach these monthly trend line levels at these levels right here, I'll be watching the lower time frames price action to see if there's any short-term long strength. For example, legitimate and fake price patterns. However, if price does fall down to this 1.3660 levels, where that weekly medium gap exists right here, even if there is no short-term long strength on the lower time frames, I'll be taking out the entire position at this level, and I will not be leaving a portion in of that short entry to that weekly biases target way down here. Alright, and moreover, there's some price action themes I do want to discuss, so let's go over to the 1 minute chart. Okay, so on this 1 minute chart on Thursday, I took that short entry at this 1.3835 levels right here, with a stop loss at this 1.3891 levels up here. So I took that trade on Thursday roughly in these areas right here, and then right after the short entry, there was another strong push up. Now typically, if there were enough sellers in this market at this point right here, after this 1 minute trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here was broken out at this point, price will typically show at least a sign of short strength. However, as you can see, price pushed up another leg even after this breakout of this clean trend line right here. And so at this point, although there was a breakout of this 1 minute trend line, and when price made another high, that told me that there was a lot of short-term long strength. So even as price pulled down right here, I did expect another move up. However, as price pushed up again the following day, getting to about 4 pips to my stop loss, I did not abort this short entry. Now the reason why is because of a foundational rule that I abide in terms of developing a price action strategy. So if you take the foundation of a strategy, for example, that would be your bias identifying strategy, your entry strategy, stop loss and target strategy, as well as trade management, as long as this foundation's rules were intact, even when price gets to 3 pips to your stop loss point, there's no reason to abort this short trade. Now, for example, if this situation on this 1 minute chart happened before and ultimately did stop out that stop loss level in the past, only at that point I would incorporate this setup of a abort of a short trade into the foundations of a strategy. However, since this setup has never been incorporated into my foundational strategy, I did not abort this short trade as price pulled back to my stop loss level. However, hypothetically, if price does pull back to the stop loss level before hitting its main target, at that point, an abort strategy with this type of short-term price action will be incorporated into my foundational strategy. Now, in my opinion, this is very important because if you're building a price action strategy, aborting a short trade due to price action that shows short-term long strength that you have never seen before does not allow the foundational strategy to evolve over the long term. So in other words, in my opinion, you always want to keep the foundation of a strategy stable and only evolve the foundation after there was proof through price action that in fact this type of lower time frame price action is a reason to abort a trade altogether. Okay, and moreover, there's 2 situations where I will abort this short entry, so let me just go ahead and explain those 2. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so again on this daily chart, I took that short entry at 1.3835, roughly at this level right here, and a stop loss at this pivot high right here, and its main target roughly at 1.37 to 1.3660 right here. Now, one situation I would abort is like always, is if there's any compact long price action that forms that shows strong long strength, I would abort this short trade immediately. However, moreover, on this daily chart, if before price reaches these targets right here, a strong long trade forms that is stronger than this previous daily short trade, that is another reason I would abort this short trade altogether immediately. Okay, if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of strong long trades and weekly biases or whatnot, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts and analysis. Okay, let's go on to the NZD-USD pair. Okay, this is the weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this move up right here, starting from this range right here, was solely based on momentum, in the long term I am short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. However, on the daily chart, since there is more long strength than short strength, In the short term, I am long bias right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So there was a weak short trade that formed right here. Then a strong long trade formed right here. So at this point, the bias was long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high up here before reaching this pivot low. And so in this entire area, I was looking for long trades on the lower time frames. However, at this point right here, there was another weekly short trade that formed. So at this point, although the bias was still long, price was stating that price is now likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. And then the following week, that main target was hit right here. And at this point, since there was no weekly bias, price just hovered right back down to the last weekly long trade stop loss level right here. Okay, and as price reached these levels right here, there is still no weekly bias, and thus I went to the lower time frames, which is a daily chart in my case, to look for a bias. And there is a new bias on the daily chart where there's a daily long trade that formed right here and a daily short trade that formed here. Now, since this long trade is stronger than this daily short trade, the current daily bias is long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. Okay, so let me explain this further. So let's go over to the daily chart. All right, so on this daily chart, that long trade that formed was right here, and that short trade that formed was right here. And since this long trade was stronger than this short trade, the current daily bias is long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. So for the time being, there's two ways I plan to enter this long bias trade. All right, the first one is very simple. If price could pull all the way back down to this 0.6900 levels, minimizing my risk for a long trade for my stop losses at this pivot low where that daily long trade formed, then at that point, I'll be willing to take a long entry, again with this stop loss at this pivot low and its main target at this pivot high right here. And number two is if price before it reaches that level where I'm willing to take a long entry, another strong daily long trade forms, in which case I'll take a long entry with the stop loss at the hypothetical long trade's pivot low stop loss level and its main target at this pivot high right here. All right, so let me go ahead and show you some possible levels that this daily long trade may form. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, there's a couple levels I'm looking at in terms of where that long entry may form. Now, one is a trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Another is a horizontal trend line right here that's attached to this pivot right here. And moreover, this medium gap right here on this monthly chart. So anywhere in these areas right here, there are strong price elements that could create a strong long trade on that daily chart. But now the price element that's closest to current price will roughly be at this 0.6955 level. So although that's very close to that pullback entry level I was mentioning earlier at this 0.69 level, this diagonal trend line is still 50 pips above it. So I will be watching these levels for a strong long daily trade to form. And moreover, lastly, I'm looking for any compact short price action to form, which shows strong short strength, in which case this does form. That daily bias will change from long into short, or in other words, price is now likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Okay, and moreover, there's one last thing I want to mention about price action. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that daily bias is stating that price is likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low right here. So ideally, to get a long trade with high quality risk to reward ratio, I need price to pull back as much as possible to the stop loss level, so I could take a long entry with a target at this pivot high right here. So in other words, I want short-term short strength. Now last week on this 4-hour chart, there was a short trade that formed right here and a long trade that formed right here, and this long trade was stronger than this previous short trade, and thus that stop loss level at this pivot high was stopped out. Now, in terms of a pullback down on this 4-hour chart, there's one of two things I want to see. So number one will simply be a short trade that's stronger than a long trade, which will show short-term short strength. But moreover, in terms of a pullback of this magnitude, I do want to see extreme short strength in the short term. And price action that precedes strong short-term short strength will be a case where there's a strong 4-hour long trade and a weak 4-hour short trade. However, price could still pull down and hit the stop loss level of this 4-hour strong long trade. To me, that would show strong short-term short strength. For although there was strong long strength and weak short strength, which traditionally shows long strength in the short term, if price still pushes down to hit the stop loss level of that strong long trade, that could show some short-term short strength even further down. So ideally, I do want this type of price action to form on the 4-hour chart also. Okay. All right, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching. Okay, bye.